Welcome back, everybody, to another episode of Uncomfortable. I'm Kirk, joined by Vince, and today we really want to dig into an interesting little topic Vince and I were discussing earlier. Should Christians celebrate the holidays? I
Dun,
mean,
dun, dun.
we've got Christmas, we've got Thanksgiving, we've got Halloween, we've got Easter. I mean, and there's people that have their own thoughts on just about every holiday out there under the sun. I mean, Vince, how many times have you and I, over the years that we've been on this earth, heard people have some sort of theory or a conspiracy or story about where a holiday originally came from and the pagan roots?
Oh yeah, absolutely. There are some folks that believe that all of our holiday, especially our basics like Easter, Christmas,
Oh, yeah.
all of that stuff, all of the big ones like that, those are all evil, and we are celebrating evil when we do it, and we're just trying to put a Christian twist to it, but it's still evil. And then there are those who think that it is one of the greatest days for believers and that we should be celebrating it and using it evangelistically and using it to remind us of the birth of Christ or the resurrection or things of that nature. So yeah, this is going to be an interesting one. I think it's going to hurt a little bit,
I mean, some people even think that
a
having
little
a
awkward.
Christmas tree is like sacrilegious because, of the whole pagan side of where trees were brought in as a form of worship with some of the, I think it was Germanic, religious acts during
Yeah,
certain.
Manic and Celtic and all those.
Yeah. So there's different questionable activities that some people have, but at the same time, Paul talks about, just to throw a monkey's wrench into things, because you know how I like to be, Vince. Paul said, I become all things to all people. Now, he didn't go out and commit sin. We know he didn't do that. He didn't go get drunk. He didn't get involved in debaucherous acts. He didn't get involved in wickedness. But what he did do is he began to relate to people where they were so that he could reach them in the center of influence that he was operating in, so that he could have a common theme to his message. Now, I guess the question we have to ask is, how far did that go? Did he take the Christmas tree and did he say, I'm going to try to turn this into something that can represent Christ because Christ was hung on a tree? Or did he completely abstain from the trees and say that's a pagan thing? Or was that not even a part of the equation for him? Was this something that was completely created by the Catholic Church as they tried to go in and influence different pagan people so that they would have a common theme and they would not lose them during holidays? Now, let me say this real quick. Before I see your wheels turning, I can see that you are thinking, but the other day, a few months ago when I was in Peru, we went down there to do some work, and one of the most interesting things is in the middle of the jungle, they started having a celebration. It was celebrating the village of Britannia, Peru. And during that celebration week, I think it actually lasted for almost 2 weeks, but almost everything grinded to a halt. I mean, they did do some work. They did other things, but all the other activities besides the normal 9 to 5 work that helped put food on the table all came to a halt because of all the activities that were planned for the village. So, how much more could it have been that way in the time of Paul? Because it was a lot like one of these extreme remote villages, right? Everything was community centered. Everything was around being around others and celebrating and having community involvement, right? So if that's the case, could that be why some of these things were introduced so that the community would get involved within more church events?
Well, you're right. The wheels and the cogs were turning. I had to go in the back room while you gave that last piece of your monologue there and get the oil and grease the cogs up a little bit.
Be careful. Be careful. You
So
might slip.
when you get to be a little older, sometimes you got to grease the wheels in your head. So,
Well, I didn't
or
think you
feed
were
the
that old,
hamster.
brother.
What did I say? Feed the hamster, right? So,
Oh, you're feeding the hamster now. So it went from greasing the wheel to feeding the hamster.
oh,
Wow.
he runs on the wheel. So, no, one thing I do remember learning from over the years with church history and sitting through a church history class at Christ for the Nations, our alma mater for Bible school, was that um, there's a lot of things that instead of the Catholic Church, like they would come in and take over an area, and instead of actually purifying and getting people to walk in a holy manner and getting rid of the idols of the past, they would just change out the idol or change out whatever the name was, slap Christian on it or slap the Catholic Church label on it and give them the affirmative and send them on their way. Because they thought, well, now that it's Christ and the saints uh instead of their pagan gods, then it's all good. So I don't. I mean, that's kind of where that went. Now, is that 100% accurate to that degree? No, but there's. I will say this: I do remember when I was in college and I was looking at a paper I had to write for when the Spanish came and took over the Aztecs in Mexico, and I was actually able to read a insert from both sides, from something that was found from Montezuma himself that he wrote about his interaction with the Spaniards, with the Crusaders or conquistadors, forgive me, not Crusaders, and from the Spanish captain or general, whoever it was at the time, and two totally different perspectives, right? And the conquistador leader was so excited, and he's like, and it's this and it's glorious and it's great and everything's wonderful and all that, and Montezuma was more like, okay, these guys are really kind of like, he was really cautious and real kind of like they're not what they say they are, and things of that nature.
Right.
Well, according to the historical record that I read, what they did is they came through this temple area that the Aztecs had built. They tore down all of their idols that were in there, and instead of those idols, they then put up statues of the different saints and Mary and
Mm-hmm.
all of them, and had them go worship them instead of their idols that they were worshiping. And they said, "This is right, and this is how you should do it." And it's if that's one. I mean, of course, history is never 100% accurate because you've got the tale of two sides, and the winner tends to write the history, so it's slightly jaded according to that.
Well, yeah, that
Um,
tends to be the way it goes, and we see that in our world today as well.
so I understand that, and I know that the actual story we'll never know until we get to heaven because it's just impossible. We can't go back in time at this phase in life. I don't know if God would let us. So I I'll say if that's even partially true, and based on some other records I've read through some historical stuff, that seems to be the case. They just kind of slapped the label on it and said, "Oh, this is Catholic now, and this is Christianity now, and so this is what you're going to do." And they're like, "Well, this isn't much different than what we were doing before. How is this supposed to be different?" Um, and they dressed him up certain ways, and they made him say certain things, and they made him pray certain things. So they taught him religion, which they already knew because that's what they were living anyway. So when it comes to celebrating these traditional holidays and all, we were raised with these holidays, just like they were raised in their idol worship from childhood up to adulthood. And they were like, and now we're like, oh, we've got all these great memories with family of Christmas and Easter, and you know, Christmas is actually about Christ. And then you go back and I mean, some people might hate me for the statement, but don't hate me. This is all for the purpose of conversation, right? To get your brain stimulated and get you researching. But is it really? Are you really actually celebrating Christ? Or are you celebrating a feeling of nostalgia that you're used to getting every year? Are you celebrating the fact that you just want to get and or give gifts because it feels good to give gifts and to get recognition from others?
Mm-hmm.
Because last time I checked, we go to these stores during this time of year and everybody's angry and they're frustrated and they're stressed and they're upset and they're in these really long lines and they cut people off and they're racing people to closer spots. And I'm like, wait, where's the love in all this? Where's the celebration of Jesus in all of this? Where's the most wonderful time of the year? Where's all that at? All these songs that you sing about glory and greatness and all good, but yet you go in the store and you're cussing and you're fussing and you're spending hundreds and thousands of dollars that you don't have to go into debt for this thing. So what's the real
you're talking
thing
about something that's a
worship?
little bit even more innocent, right? Because you're talking about Christmas.
Sure.
But let's think about Halloween.
Dun, dun, dun.
Because, it's all about death. It's all about demons and ghouls and vampires and fill in the blank of whatever horrific creature you can think about. There's in our current culture today, because of all the horror movies that have gone on, there's a lot of horror flicks and depictions that you see. People, glorifying death and murder. And so should Christians even be a part of that? When you're glorifying death, when you're almost worshiping death, and I've heard some people talk about the Day of the Dead in Mexicans.
Yeah.
My wife is from Mexico and she refuses to celebrate the Day of the Dead because she talks about how at the Day of the Dead that they actually set out food to the idols that they build to the dead people.
Mm-hmm.
And the question is, and I'm not calling anything one way or the other currently. I'm not saying in the future that I won't, but currently I'm not. But think about it this way. Could it be that when we set up, jack-o'-lanterns and other pieces like that, and then we set them out, could it not be that we're creating carven images?
Oh, ouch.
I'm just saying, could it not be that we're celebrating possible demonic entities in the face of a day that's dedicated to death and to destruction and to everything that's not godly?
Yeah, but what happens if you dress it up a little bit? If instead of all that stuff, you just have pumpkin carvings and hay bales and Christian songs and have them dress up like Christian characters?
It's a good question. I do not have the perfect answer, but the
harvest parties instead of Halloween.
I know people that have those, and I know people that are against them. I know churches that are for them because they say they're outreaches. I know some churches that are so adamantly against them that they feel like it's a complete satanic act and that there's no way you can be any, not even a little bit a part of it. So the question is, how can we be a part of the culture but be separated from it? How can we be a light to the world in the midst of the darkness while not participating within the darkness? Because the question is not how close can I get to sin to be okay. The question is how can I reach those that are in sin and pull them out?
But see, that's kind of the main question as a whole that we have to kind of spin back to. How do we walk in it but not be of it? How do we continue to shine a light in a dark place?
The one thing that stands out to me, Jesus would go sit and eat and drink with the sinners. Now, he didn't get drunk. He did not participate in the party life, but he would be sitting at the table, and there was one thing that stood out to me all of the years that I've studied the Word of God, is when the sinners would come up to Jesus, they would say, Rabbi. The word says, or the Torah says, the teaching says, the law says, and they would present gospel truth from their written law, and ask him what it was saying, asking for clarification, asking for insight. And so by the way they addressed Jesus that there was an air of separation in the way he handled himself,
And respect.
to where it was very distinguished against the way everybody else was acting and carrying themselves. He was very distinguished. It doesn't mean that he stood out in his three-piece suit, being holier than thou. But it does mean that there was a holy reverence in the way he would conduct himself, to where he was very separated from sin.
But I think that also people were more aware of the fact that he was in the room.
Yes.
It's the same way that, okay, so I don't know about nowadays, but I remember there was a time and I was sitting in somebody's house and there was some people that knew that I was one of the pastors in the nearby church, and some people didn't. So they had just come over and they were hanging out with us, right?
Right.
And they're fussing and cussing and talking about life and all that jazz. And so I'm like, okay, whatever. I mean, it's not phasing me. I'm like, all right, they probably don't even know the Lord anyway. And come to find out they didn't. So I have nothing. It's not like I could say anything. You're just acting like who you are, whatever. I'm not judging you on that. And so all of a sudden somebody goes, "Hey man, watch your mouth. We got a pastor in the room." And they're like, "What?" And they look over and they're like, "Pastor Vince." And like, "Oh, Pastor, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry, Pastor. I'll stop cussing now." And not like, dude, it's okay. Don't be all upset and freaked out. You're just being yourself. He's like, no, I shouldn't have done that. God's gonna get me. I'm cussing in front of a pastor. And I'm like, man, look, God don't treat people like that anyway. So whoever told you that's wrong. The point of the story though is the fact that there was, like you said, there was a respect there. There was a reverence there that existed. So I do think to a degree, they did change how they acted around him.
Absolutely.
I don't think they went all out like they would if it was just their crew. I do think that they acted slightly different with him around.
I agree with you.
Polished and proper.
It's kind of like, I remember hearing a story from a pastor, and if anyone's heard this story before, they'll know who I'm talking about. But he was talking about how he made a comment about something to a church person. And this person got indignant with him. And he knew it, and he could tell, and he looked at him, so just cuss me. And the lady looked at him and goes, I would never. And he goes, well, why not? And she goes, well, I'm in the church. And he goes, why do you think that matters? God's in the church and he's outside of the church. He knows everything that you do here and there. So what's the difference? And it made her think, I mean, you could see the shock on her face, because she was not expecting the fact that just because she was not in the church that God was going to be able to hear anyway. It was almost like she assumed that because, if she was in the church, it was almost like taboo beyond taboos,
Well, yeah, the church is, you can't act and say that stuff in the church. You could say it outside because God only lives in the church. He's only in the church building. So,
you know what that reminds me of, Vince? Remember way back when, dig deep. There's going to be some cobwebs there, I'm sure. Whenever you first went to the grocery store, Walmart, well, it wasn't Walmart when we were growing up, but going to the store with our parents, and the first time we saw the teacher outside of the school, and we would look at our mom and say, what is Mrs. or Mr. So-and-so doing here? It's like, wow, they actually go to the store. And the teachers would always get humored as well, because they were like, yeah, I go to the grocery store as well.
I'm a regular person. Yep.
I'm not only at the school. I don't only exist at the school.
Then when you leave, I just disappear.
But isn't that how we treat God?
A lot of times, especially.
I mean, not everybody, but isn't that how many people, when they address God and they interact with God, it's almost as though they interact with God one way whenever they're at church. But when they're at home, or they're at work, they're in their car, it's 100% different. They've completely siloed their life.
I agree. It's kind of how it is. We live in these compartments thinking that if we confine our sin to these compartments and we confine our Jesus time to these other compartments, then then Jesus won't know about the other things because we can close the door and it'll be hidden from him.
Newsflash, people.
He knows everything.
Jesus knows what you looked on Facebook. He knows what you're looking on at Instagram, and he knows what you tweeted last night when you got mad at that person. And the reality is he knows all things.
I'll go one step further. He knew it when you were thinking about doing it.
Amen. That's why
Like,
Jesus
oh,
told
dang.
people, he's like, if you even lust upon a woman, it's as if you committed adultery. Basically, he's saying, look, if you're entertaining the thoughts, it's as if you've already done the deed.
Yep.
He's not saying that you did the deed. He's saying that, look, he goes, in your heart was already somewhere it wasn't supposed to be.
You're already sitting in your heart, yeah.
Exactly. In your heart, you are not in righteousness. So what are we supposed to do, Vince? How do we roll this back into something practical? Because the reality is we're not trying to condemn you if you celebrate holidays. We want you to think. We want you to get in the Word. We want you to dig deep and nurture the relationship you have with God and not just go with the flow and float through life. What we want you to do is be enriched and equipped in all that you can be.
I think you kind of just answered your own question, though, in the sense that the point is that you need to go digging.
That's it.
You need to dig into the Word first and foremost. That needs to be the first place you go digging.
Get out that pick and that shovel and start digging deep.
Right. I mean, don't look, digging through history is great. And I promise you, if you hit the internet, you're going to find things to support celebrating Halloween, Easter, Christmas, all of them. And you're going to find things too that are going to condemn it and tell you not to celebrate it because they're evil. For me, it's a matter of what is Jesus saying to you? What is the Word saying to you? Now, I wasn't going to do this, but I will. I will now. So I celebrated Christmas a good portion of my life. And probably about 5, 6 or so years ago, I'm just like, I'm not really going to celebrate holidays at all anymore. Part of it was I just kind of lost I had no desire to. It wasn't like it's evil and it's wrong, or it's good and it's great. It was just, I got so tired of what I was seeing. I got so tired of the commercialism. I got so tired of you got to act a certain way. You got to dress a certain way. You got to be a certain way. And all of a sudden, magically on these days of the year, everything in your life was perfect. There were no problems because it was Christmas. There were no problems because it was Easter. And you can mask everything because it's Halloween and everybody wears suits and dresses up like Bible characters. So that's okay. But then you woke up on the next day and you still had issues to deal with. And all of a sudden there's this huge letdown because that holiday was over now. You had all this build up for nothing. So I just kind of like let it go, and I'm like, I'm done. I really don't care anymore.
You made me wonder, could it be that we're all about putting on masks for many times, not just for Halloween, but putting on masks for the holidays, trying to think about it. What is our current culture with social media? We're always trying to post our best to the social feed. We're giving our highlight reel. So could it be that even especially in today's world, could it be that we've become a culture that seeks the highlight reel of our life to post to others, not really giving any substance, but only giving the superficial so that we can give the appearance that everything's okay?
Yeah, and it does temporarily make us feel better for the moment. It's just a Band-Aid, but it's like a Band-Aid over a gaping hole. But so for me, it was like that. And then, I started doing some studying and searching, and I found that there's just a lot of aspects to these holidays I just didn't personally agree with. So I just kind of stayed away from them. And what I did instead is I went back to the Word, and there are a couple of the feasts or things like that I kind of sort of celebrate and do to a point. Now, the rest of my family doesn't necessarily feel the same way I do. And so we've come to a compromise, and we do some stuff and not others. I don't hate on them. I don't judge them. It's whatever. That's on them to do. And I have to walk mine out, and we have to meet in the middle somewhere. One of the things that we did do in this meeting in the middle is we started our own little tradition. And it's not that it's this like, oh no, we have to do this, because there's years we haven't done this.
Did
But
you get
there's some
hooky
years.
spooky?
No, no, no. It's not for Halloween. It's for Christmas. And I'm harping on Christmas because it's the largest one of them all, and it's the one that, honestly, in the last several years, I've seen a lot of contention between the two sides with. So that's kind of why I'm bringing it up. I keep going back to that one because I feel like Halloween should be a little more obvious. But we call it a Jesus birthday cake, and we just do white cake, red Jello, and we pour it on it over there, let it set, and then we put whipped cream on the top. And we talk about the fact that the red stands for the blood, the white stands for the purity from the washing of the water. I mean, washing of the blood over us, and these, and just things like that, just to keep pointing it to Jesus and Him alone. And then, we'll say Happy Birthday, Jesus, and all that stuff like that. And we know it's not His official time, and that's like some people say it's October, September. Some people say it's as far early as April. I'm not going to get into that discussion because I don't have the authoritativeness on that issue to
If
talk
any of
about
y'all
that.
do start the new
that,
tradition
so.
to where you start making a white cake with red Jello and some whipped cream on top, I need to hear about it at uncomfortable@mooseministries.org. Okay, I've got to hear about this. I've never done this before, but you've got me curious. I'm wondering if it tastes pretty good. Do you use like strawberry, raspberry?
We usually do raspberry. So yeah,
It sounds pretty good.
I like it. It's pretty good. We let it set for overnight, and then we put the whipped cream on it the next day, and then we we cut it up and have it. It's pretty good. So listen, it's not too hard. We just do either the white or yellow cake, whichever one's
I
available.
know it's not spiritual, but I'm very curious. Does it get soggy?
No, because it's Jello.
Okay. I'm guessing you have to keep it cold.
Well, sure. I mean, you keep Jello cold.
Okay.
So,
just checking your facts. I'm doing the fact check. Because we get a fact check here.
Yeah. No, I agree. I think it's important. Fact check me all you need to, bro.
Especially when it comes to Jello.
You gotta have your Jello right. But I remember sitting in a conversation actually last semester, excuse me, about this very thing with Halloween, and they were talking about the do's and don'ts, or is it right to do harvest parties and all of that kind of stuff like that, and whether it be even on a different night, it's still the same basic premise, and are you still doing the same thing? And I've seen those letters that have popped up on the internet where the enemy's like, oh, thank you so much for doing this. And so I've seen a whole lot of that stuff. I've listened to the different sides of the argument and conversations. And then there's this one thing that kind of crept up to me, and I started to realize this being back here at CFNI. Every year they make mention of the fact that that on the 31st is the anniversary of the day that Martin Luther nailed the 95 Theses to the cathedral, right?
There you go.
In whatever place. And so they call that Reformation Day. And so what they do here at CFNI is they just spend the day in worship. They usually have a whole day of worship, or the whole class, like they cancel all classes and just do worship and praise and all that and stuff like that. So,
I think they should just cancel work, school, everything, and just have a day of worship on Halloween. That's exactly what I think needs to happen.
Yeah, worship who you want to worship. If you want to worship Jesus, great. If you want to worship the enemy, well, I mean, that's on you. You have to deal with that.
You're in the United States of America, so you have the freedom, but we would encourage you to worship Jesus.
Worship Jesus. Yes, absolutely. No, the people that we are, we would say worship Jesus. He is the way, the truth, and the life, and there's no way to get to heaven except through him. And I promise you, it's so much better than dealing with the enemy. But it's I know we're wrapping up too, but I'll say this. This is going to be part of my closing part. Is I've come to love that time, and to me, it stands as a complete contradiction to what gets done elsewise. It's not here. We're just going to slap a Christian label on it, twist and tweak a couple of things, and it's still basically the same thing that everybody else is doing. It stands in stark contrast to what everybody in the world's doing. So I appreciate that. And look, that's not condemning anybody. I'm not judging anybody. You have to come to the conclusion when God brings you to that space. So that's my closing statement.
There you go, buddy. Well, for me, I would say chase God with all your heart. Don't lean on your own understanding. This conversation was not something to get offended over, but it is something to me. It is completely meant to stir you up, to
Get
chase the Word
uncomfortable.
of God, get in the gospel, study the Word, and to further your relationship with Christ. We want you to have a strong foundation in the gospel. We yearn for you to grow in your relationship with God. Guys, if you have any questions, if you have any show ideas, any prayer requests, please contact us at uncomfortable@mooseministries.org. If you have a prayer need for your ministry, please contact us. We definitely want to pray for your ministry. And also, Vince is reminding me that we now have a prayer wall, and that you can go to mooseministries.org, and you can go to, I think it's under ministries or something. There's a spot where you can go to a prayer wall and you can post your prayer request. And then if somebody prays for you, they can click it and it'll show that someone prayed for your prayer request. So guys,
Amen.
love to hear from you. Definitely want to talk to you soon and pray with you about your ministry, your mission trip. If there's other issues going on, please let us know. We would love to lift you up in prayer, because that's something that God has put on our hearts, to pray for the nations, pray for our community, and pray for those around us. Guys, God bless you. Have a great day.
See y'all later.